The show ended on that ominous note. As those around my friends and I wandered out of the auditorium, I turned to Mercy as I asked, "What do you think we will face out there when facing corrupted fairy tales? Think that means we're going to face an evil three pigs?" I asked Mercy, and she stared back at me and she asked, "You've never read the children's and household tales, have you?" She asked me and I shook my head. "Grimm's fairy tales?" She tried again, and I shook my head as she tried a third route. "Tales of My Mother Goose?" She tried again, and I shook my head again. I never had time to learn any of those old European tales. I was too focused on the present to worry about old stories. You don't call me the Tactician because I spend my time reading. Whatever is out there, it cannot be scarier than an Odokuro. You truly cannot understand how scary things can get, Mercy. I told her as she sighed, and we made our way to the exit door. But instead of a market or stalls, the attraction began immediately. Just outside of the auditorium was a hedge maze that stood at least 4 meters tall. On the roof of the hedge maze were iron bars that were made either for keeping us from climbing over, or made for keeping something else from climbing into the hedge maze. When we made it our first to our first choice, I stopped when I saw what choices we could make. There were 4 branching paths, one forward, 2 to the left, and 1 to the right. This was already off to an ominous start as I peered down each path, peeking into the future as I gazed down each path. I could view both objective and subjective futures with my power. If it is a decision that I can make, it is a future that I can see. So I can see what it would be like if I go down one path over the other. But this was also a downside to my power. I can only see up to a minute in the future. An incredibly useful ability when playing sports, when I have a quick bet that is something like a coin flip, but not nearly as helpful in situations where I had to see the future just a little further forward. So, using the analogy of a coin flip, I can see the coin flip because that is less than a minute in the future. I cannot, however, view what lottery numbers will win, because those are announced on a different day. Hence why my cognomen was Tactician and not Strategist. And seeing a minute into the future wasn't helpful with these paths because all of these paths had the exact same future a minute into the future. Just walking down the path waiting for something to happen. So that wasn't helpful. So now I thought instead about the paths themselves. They were all checkered with a black and white square pattern, looking like a modified chessboard, but that too didn't give me any real advantage. Chess was something I struggled with because even though I could see every choice that the opponent would make, they would always respond to me responding to them. So any future I saw would become impossible by the next choice I made. Fucking frustration when you're expecting yourself to be able to predict and control the future. When you give people free will, it means that they are going to make choices that you could never predict, even with future sight. So instead, I based the decision on what I did know about the layout of the pumpkin house. The pumpkin house was in the center of the map, and we entered from the southern quarter. So even if there were twists, turns, surprises, and challenges, the overall geography was going to be consistent. So as long as we kept heading north generally, then we would make our way to the center. So I pointed to the right, and the others followed behind me, and I asked out loud, "Why the hell did there have to be 4 paths?" Oddly enough, it was Mary who spoke up and answered, which I was not expecting. "It's the way Adonse sees the world. In her eyes, it isn't a crossroads if there isn't at least 4 paths. 5 if you're clever," she mentioned with her eyes flicking from top to bottom, in disagreement with that thought process. "What, 5 paths? There are only 4 paths there," I said, pointing back where we came from, only to see it was now blocked with thorny roses that made up the hedge maze. "That wasn't there a moment ago," I said meekly. Mary answered like she didn't care about the fact our way back was now blocked by overgrown flowers and thorns. There was also the way back. The way back is supposed to always be an option. When the way back is taken away from you, it is taken away from you. Clearly, this is one of her tricks. Mary finished, and I glanced down the path and also where we came from. The way back was unreachable, and the only way was forward, a path that I couldn't see the end of. Just a little bit down the path as we continued, and I found myself leading again. Why are we letting me lead? I once got lost looking for the GPS, I said as a joke, and this time it was Mercy Love that answered. Pataphysics. There is a group of us, so each of us needs a chance to lead. Otherwise, we will never get where we need to go. This place isn't just entertainment for us, it's also entertainment for the performers. If everyone reacted the exact same way, there would be little joy from the performances. So everyone gets a chance to lead, and everyone gets a chance to react first, she said, and I turned to her. What do you know about pataphysics? I thought your specialty was humanity. The humanities, Mercy corrected. And honestly, pataphysics applies a lot in places like this. If you cannot understand the broad strokes of why tropes, motifs, and patterns occur, you have a harder time dealing with the pattern if you cannot see the pattern. If you cannot think pataphysically, you just talk about larger concepts, like the patterns of abuse, feuds, revenge, curses, and trauma, or just words. Understanding these concepts and how to exploit or counter them requires an understanding of pataphysics and understanding how both the world shapes you and how you shape the world. So, like the stories that the King of Hearts mentioned, Mary mentioned, while being held by her boyfriend, and Mercy nodded. Yes, exactly. Pataphysics is understanding the world a lot like how you might understand a story. We even use some of the same terminology, albeit in a very different way. We use a narrative to understand a sequence of events from A to B to C, and how those events play into the setting it's in. Wandering a maze in a haunted house is different from wandering a maze at the mall, for example, she said, and I turned to Mercy and I asked my date. And how is that different? Well, here, the riddles actually read like riddles rather than sales pitches, Mercy said, as we arrived at a place where the two doors stood. Each door was guarded by a different knight, one with a black feather plume and the other plume white. Above the guards was an inscription in obsidian with the words in common Creole. One here is cursed to always tell the truth, the others are cursed to always lie. You may ask one question to any knight to find out which door leads to the pumpkin house. The other door leads back to hell. The inscription read, and everyone looked towards me as I finally had something I could do. I stepped forward like I was going to ask the knights a question, as I thought of the future, and I peeked into the future, where I did ask the knights a question. In a potential future, I saw myself ask the knight with a white plume what color his plume was, and in that future, the knight responded that the color of his plume was blue. So I knew that one was clearly lying, but I wanted to verify, so I also checked the future where I asked the knight what color of his plume was, and he also said that his plume was blue. What the hell? I didn't even speak my question yet, and already I caught both of the knights in a lie. That shouldn't be possible, especially if this is supposed to be a fair game. So instead, I tried a different question in the future before trying to ask the question in the present. I asked the knight with the white plume, if I asked the knight with the black feather, which door leads to the pumpkin house, which door would it be? I asked the future, only to have the knight with the white plume say, the door behind you. That wasn't helpful, so I asked the future knight with the black plume the same question. If I asked the knight with the white feather which door leads to the pumpkin house, which door would it be? And the knight with the black feather plume responded the exact same way. The door behind you. Damn it. I could feel my teeth grind as I looked at the others, who were still waiting for me to make a decision. The two knights in front of me were still waiting for me to actually ask the question. But this doesn't make any sense at all. The inscription above was very clear that one was lying and the other was telling the truth. This was supposed to be the simple kind of riddle you get when you're in first year. So why was I stuck on it? So instead, I looked carefully back at the inscription again and I read it again, this time much more carefully. One here is cursed to always tell the truth. The others are cursed to always lie. You may ask one question to any knight to find out which door leads to the pumpkin house. The other door leads back to hell. Wait, one here is cursed to tell the truth. The others are cursed to always lie. That meant only one is obliged to tell the truth. But the inscription didn't say it was a knight cursed to tell the truth. The inscription was the one telling us the truth, and the others were lying. Others, plural. So the knights are liars. Actually, no, they weren't liars. They were cursed to always lie. A slight but important distinction. Mary may have been stronger at economica of crime than I was, but I was salutatorian, and I was willing to use what I knew about the economica of crime to push myself ahead. These two lie to me. That part is obvious. What else is obvious is that they lie in the exact same way, so it did not matter who I asked, the answer would always remain the same. And the important part of them being cursed to lie, rather than being professional liars, meant that they couldn't use the truth. This is important because one of the lessons of economica of crime was that even liars can tell the truth, and when you expect a liar to lie, if they tell the truth, you prepare against something that isn't there. And if they were just lying to me to lie, then they may have chosen to be honest to deceive me. They might have said something different just to confuse or confound. But since they both said the same thing, that is a constant and something I can use. So let me go over what I do know certainly, then I can compare it to my assumptions. I know that one door leads to the pumpkin house, and I know one leads to hell. I know the knights will lie no matter what question I say. I know that I can only ask one knight one question to find out which door leads to the pumpkin house. I know that no matter who I ask the question, the answer will always be the same. And now on to my assumptions. My assumption is that there is a question I can ask one knight that will tell me which door is the way to the pumpkin house. I've used my future sight to try and see if I could ask one what the other would say, and the answer was the same. So my assumption is the question will be the same. I ask the knight directly what doors lead to the pumpkin house. But why am I assuming that? I know that the knights are required to lie. So if they're lying about a lie, then when I ask the knight directly what door to choose, then the answer will be different than the door behind me. Now with something I can test, I peek into the future again, where I ask the knight with the white feather directly, which door leads to the pumpkin house? And this time, I got a direct answer. The door to the right. And now, I had that proof. I tested it with the knight with the black feather, and he said the same thing. The door to the right. That meant that the correct door was the door to the left. Still though, these are just sights in the future that I saw. I still needed to ask them directly in the present. So now confident, I asked the knight with the black feather the question that would start everything. "Oh, kind knight, can you please tell us which of these doors lead to the pumpkin house?" I asked the knight, and I felt something shift in the world around me, as the knight spoke with a smile in his voice. A smile that I only heard in the present, and not in any future flash that I had. "The door to the pumpkin house is on the left. The door to hell is on the right." he said as he stood aside, and so did the knight with the white plume, and I was paralyzed by choice now. My previous assumptions were all based on knowing what the future had to say. But something here affected my future sight. My future sight was wrong. Mercy tapped me on the shoulder as she asked, "Which door do we take?" She asked me, and I looked down at my hands and at the identical doors. I I don't know. I was using future sight, but it failed me. So now I don't know what to do next. When I saw the future, they were supposed to lie to me and say the door on the right is the way to the pumpkin house, which would have meant that the door on the left was safe. But that cannot be true now because they were both liars. But they were liars in my future sight, not in the present. And now I used up my one question. If I could just go back by a few seconds, I said as I tried to think of a new angle. I now had no proof that the sign was accurate. I now had no proof that either knight was a liar. For all I know, they were both willing to tell the truth, and my future sight was lying to me. And if my future sight could lie to me in a place like this, then where else would it lie to me? While I was stuck in my head, Valero and Mary both looked at both doors, trying to figure something out, while Mercy looked around her purse. "Hold on there, just one moment. I have an idea," she said as she pulled out 1 centi from her purse. I was confused by what she was trying to do. "Now, I'm going to flip this coin. You need to predict which way I am going to flip it," she said as she held the coin out to me, showing me both sides of the coin, the imperial seal on one side and the other with the head of the emperor. Still confused, I looked into the future, and I chuckled as I answered. "You're not going to flip it," I said, and she smiled. "Yes, exactly. Now I'll flip it." She flipped it and grabbed it from the air and covered it with one hand, and she asked again, "Now, what side of the coin is beneath my hand?" she asked, and I peeked into the future. "Heads," I said as she lifted her hand, and it revealed the imperial seal. "Tails." "What does that tell us?" I asked her, and she explained. "Whatever is causing your future sight to be compromised isn't keeping you from seeing actions. It's keeping you from seeing the proper results. Your sight is lying to you, essentially. So, what action would they take in your sight?" she asked, and I thought. They were lying. Excellent. So, they lied in the vision, so they are lying now. You just saw a different result, not their action. So, if we know that they are lying, then we know that the right door to the pumpkin house is to the right, she explained, and I looked at the doors, taking a few careful steps toward the door, my hand on the handle as I thought it through again. I couldn't trust my mind. I couldn't trust my power. I couldn't even trust my logic because it led me into such a disastrous choice. I wish I could go back and try again. Maybe I could do better with another try. All I had to move me forward was Mercy Love's reason and logic. So I took a deep breath and I opened the door to the right. We stepped through and we continued down the path as we passed more and more roses, and Mercy whispered to me as she cuddled close to me. "I think we made the right choice," she said as we continued, and I asked her, "What makes you an expert on lying all of a sudden?" "Thought you got an 87% in economica of crime," I asked her, and she corrected me again. 78%. And I have a lot of experience with liars. My family is full of them. But I'm pretty sure we're at our next challenge," she said as she held my hand. "And what makes you say that?" I asked her, and she pointed forward to a house made out of gingerbread candy. It blocked the way forward, and the only way we could move forward would be heading through the candy house. But it wasn't the house that caused me to pause. It was what was in front of the house. The fence around the house was adorned with bones, and on every spike was a human head. Every spike had a different head in a different state of decay. Some of them had their tongues ripped out, others had their jaw removed, and then there were those that had their eyes ripped out. Those heads that still had their eyes followed us as we got closer. Everyone looked at the candy house, at the fence of bone and skull. "What is this from?" I asked as Mary explained. "I want to say the house reminds me of Gretel and Hansel's story. The candy house is familiar, but there was no mention of a fence with bones and heads on it. To the best of my knowledge, there is nothing like that in Gothic folklore at all. I think there was something about a Kievan witch that did something with bones and skulls, but that is a rather big blind spot in my memory. Do you know anything about this, Mercy?" she asked Mercy, who shook her head. "No, I don't. It's certainly not Kimru. It also isn't Fae, because Fae aren't this direct. It isn't satanic nor demonic. I think you're right about it being Kievan, but other than the name of the witch, I don't know much," she explained. "Well, what is the name of the witch?" I asked a bit impatiently. Sometimes they spend a lot more time theorizing and discussing rather than just sharing the information that they have on hand. Assuming that everyone around them had the same information that they just skipped over. Well, the name of the Kievan witch is Baba Yaga. He is a cannibal with a love for children's flesh specifically, which isn't too different from the unnamed witch in the Grimm tale. But Baba Yaga is a lot more dangerous from what I remember. But I don't remember any of the legends or tales clearly. "Just try to be careful," Mercy offered, and I asked, "If you don't remember any legends or tales, how do you know if that Baba Yaga, whose name literally means old woman, is more dangerous than an unnamed Gothic witch?" "Because Baba Yaga wasn't killed in her legend. The Gothic witch was," she warned me. And after a moment of silent contemplation, Valero spoke up. "Why didn't anyone ask me if I knew about this house? Do you know anything about the house?" "Well, no, but I'd like to be included," Valero said awkwardly, as he looked down at his feet and Mary began to comfort him, and I turned back to the candy door. "There is no other way around, is there? We have to go through," I said as I led them to the door. "I have nothing to be afraid of. The stories where I am from are a lot scarier than yours," I said to Mercy, but just before I knocked on the door, I heard Mercy sigh. She said to herself, "Said like someone who's never seen a puka, a cephal or the midnight washerwoman," she said as I paused to turn back to her. "Yeah, say that when you have to deal with an Odokuro." "I did, not an hour ago." "Fair, but I don't think anything called a puka could be as deadly as a yurei. Now, let's deal with this old hag," I said as I knocked on the door, and from inside a matronly voice called out from inside, speaking a little strangely, like the owner of the voice was speaking to themselves. "Oh, visitors for All Hallows Eve? I've hardly cleaned, I have hardly cooked, I've hardly eaten, and I think I can now. Tell me, visitors, before I open this door, do you come by your own free will, or did someone else force you here?" There was quiet as I realized I was supposed to answer, and I shrugged as I answered in a similar way. "A lesson from Diplomacy 101, you meet people where they are when they speak first. You always act more polite than they treat you, but you have to use a similar language or word choice to decrease miscommunications. If someone spoke to you in a professional tone, you use the same tone. If someone speaks to you in a friendly way, you respond with warmth. And if someone speaks in a poetic way, you answer in the same way." I suppose you can say I was brought here by the will of another, I said as I held Mercy's hand, who squeezed my hand, and I continued. And by another part, I was brought here by my own will and desire, I said. My other hand rested on my heart as I finished. And the final part you can say was done by the power of fate, because no man can walk life free of fate, I said with my mouth smiling because of the last sentence. No man can walk life free of fate, but I am no man, and my half golden eye allowed me to play with the fate in a way few could even dream of. There was silence on the other side of the door before the voice spoke up. "That was the correct choice. Welcome to my house. Enter freely of your own will, leave safely when fate allows, and leave some of your happiness behind," the voice said as the door creaked open. I could see the inside of the home. It was a lot like the outside of the house as well. Candy decorated the inside of the house, but under where the candy cracked, I could see exposed flesh and blood vessels gently twitch. Like the house itself was a living thing, and I was entering the mouth. And enter I did. I don't know why, but step after step I walked into the candy house, and I saw our host, or should I say, hosts. They were triplets, as far as I could tell. They looked young and beautiful one moment, and when shadow crossed their faces, they were aged crones, one which had dark hair with a crescent moon on her necklace, not just the shape, which is so common it could be found in every market, in every country, in every timeline. The charm was perfectly round, with the gold itself painted black, where the moon was eclipsed by Earth's shadow. Another witch had blonde hair, and her necklace had a charm of a star on it. This one also apparently gold, with black paint covering the heart of the charm, so the gold had to reflect through. And then there was the final witch. She appeared youngest when they were all young, and she was oldest when they were all old. Her hair was red, and her charm was a sun in gold, with no black at all tarnishing the gold. And when they all spoke in the same voice, as they moved inside of the crowded house with ease. As we watched the witches move, they seemed to be full of contradictions. When old, they moved without pain, and they were deliberate and precise with their movements, like every action was planned out and executed flawlessly. When young, they acted without reason, and in great pain, that created random actions that had end results I could not have predicted. For example, Star smacked her wooden spoon into a pan above her head, only for the pan to fall near her feet, before she kicked the pan towards the oven. As the pan knocked the oven open, as the cauldron inside spilled out, only to be caught by Star, now an old woman, as she offered the massive cauldron to us. "It is All Hallows Eve. Accept a treat for yourself," Star said. "However, some of the treats also have tricks inside," Moon said. "But such is the joy of trick-or-treating," Sun finished. All of them spoke in the same voice, so it made it hard to know who was speaking if I wasn't watching their lips myself. Even looking into the future only brought me a headache because it just showed more chaotic actions that I couldn't see why or how it started. "Thank you, and may I know the name of my hosts before I take a treat?" I asked as I glanced into the cauldron. I could see that the cauldron was full of strange items that did not make sense to have inside of an oven. "Ah, very well. Will introduce myself to the children. I will treat you with kindness because I expect kindness in return. I am Baba Yaga," said the witch with the sun. "Think yourself clever, child of Nippon. I can smell your blood and the blood of your friends from here. No son of Rome has overpowered my strength. No child of Nippon has refused my hospitality. No daughter of dreams has woken under my roof, and no child of hell has outsmarted my wisdom. I am Baba Yaga. Sister, the Baba Yaga, the witch with the star said in the same voice, and I immediately did not trust her. But there was still one more witch to introduce herself. I am nothing more than a prisoner of my own choices, made free by the threads of fate. I am the princess of an isolated cabin in the middle of nowhere. I am the lowest peasant in the manners of magic. I am more magic than a palace full of fairies. I am more tragic than a graveyard full of nameless tombstones. I am Baba Yaga, sister to Baba Yaga, and sister to Baba Yaga. Now I ask you, take a treat, she said, offering the cauldron that I could see had wrapped candies, and also bones that stood straight out, and not far underneath the candy layer, I could see that something was moving underneath. Thank you, Baba Yaga, and Baba Yaga, I said to the three witches as I reached inside to pull out a wrapped chocolate peanut butter cup. Mercy grabbed a bone from the inside of the cauldron. Interesting choice. Why did you choose the bone? Star asked Mercy Love as she held up the bone. It was humorous, she said to the chuckles of the three witches, who enjoyed her clever wordplay, as Valera reached in for a taffy for himself, and Mary plunged her hand deep into the cauldron, and she pulled up what was writhing beneath. In her hand was the largest centipede that I have ever seen. As she held the large insect up, and everyone stared at her, and the witches asked her now, "Wow, you pulled out the greatest treat inside of the cauldron. I hope it is everything you wanted and more. Please try it. Please eat it. None of us have ever been so lucky to get something so fresh," the witches said, one after the other, as Mary looked deep in my eyes before she lifted the squirming centipede up to her mouth, as she stuck the head into her mouth, and she bit down. The centipede's feet still squirmed as she chewed and crunched on the centipede, and even the witches flinched a bit from her actions. Oh my, that was certainly unexpected. How does it taste? How does it feel? You want more? We have more, the witches said as Mary shook her head as she lifted up the centipede to her mouth, and I could see her sign with her other hand. It had to be spelled out, but the word was there. Candy bad, she signed as she chewed on the centipede, and I realized I unwrapped the candy, even though it looked perfectly appetizing. When I smelled it, it smelled like it went bad centuries ago. So I quietly discarded it, while Valero did the same, and everyone was stuck watching Mary finish her centipede. The centipede is plenty for me to eat. I thank you for your hospitality, grannies, she said as she glanced my way, asking for me to ask them. Tell me, how can we make our way to the pumpkin house? I asked them, and they all turned to each other, and they asked, Have you been to the pumpkin house? No, but you have. Remember, you went there for a new broom not that long ago. No, that wasn't her. That was Baba Yaga, not Baba Yaga. Oh, of course. I hate it when I confuse you with me. Then there was silence as the witches were satisfied with their answer, but I was not. Can you please tell us how we can get to the pumpkin house from here? I asked the witches as they spoke again. How? That's easy. There's a whiz by pestle, Star said, pointing to a pestle and mortar that looked large enough to sit in. There's also by broom. I hear it's popular among that one bitch from Albion, Moon said, holding up a wooden broom with wooden bristles. Which bitch? The one who's dead? Not that bitch. The one who we wish was dead. Though it was popular with her too. But Mercy's family will take care of them both. There is a third way. It's by walking. But that's a lot easier to do when your cabin walks, Sun said, pointing towards the front door. Are there directions for how to get to the pumpkin house? I asked, and this time they were clearly angry at me. If I wasn't clear, all you have to do is find out where the pumpkin house is, then find a form of transportation you can use, then you do that. It's really quite simple. The Jolly Man figured that one out. Doesn't he owe you a horse? No, that's your ex-husband. The Jolly Man owes me 12 bucks. You're not thinking of the present. The Jolly Man isn't around for another 18 years. Right now, the Necromancer is the Man of Winter. Well, the Jolly Man still owes me 12 bucks, and Baba Yaga's ex-husband owes me a horse. How can he owe you 12 bucks when you haven't loaned him reindeer yet? He will owe me 12 bucks after he borrows from me. But does that answer the tactician's question? Well, no, but answering the tactician's question requires a prerequisite that I doubt they can ever abide. And what is that? I asked. I have to care about answering your question first, Moon said. So you are intentionally messing with me? Me? No. Intentionally? Yes. Messing? Also yes. With you? No. You really don't understand how it goes, Sun said, and before I had a chance to ask, she clarified. To say, it's me, implies that it is an action that I am taking by myself. I am not acting alone. Intentionally? Yes, because we are all acting this way with understanding of what we are doing and why. Messing implies preventing you from achieving your goal that could be done cleanly or easily. We aren't stopping you from achieving your goal, but we don't make it easy. With you, no. We aren't acting alongside you. We are acting against you, Sun said with a smile, and I closed my eyes and rubbed my eyes as I tried to think of something else I can do. Thought we were easy to deal with because you weren't familiar with us? Thought we couldn't be scary because we aren't your countrymen? Thought we are harmless because our name sounds silly, and now you see why simple names can hurt so much, Tactician, the witches said, and I leaned back, rubbing my temples, trying to figure out how to get them on the right path. Okay, so what would it take for us to convince you to take us to the next part of the pumpkin house? I asked the witches, who turned to each other, and then they turned back to me. Why should we assist you? What benefit is there to us? Why would a villain ever give something willingly to you? Moon asked me before I tried peering again into the future. Except when I tried to look into the future, I only got a headache. There was nothing I could see. There was no noise, no sight, no sensation. What is keeping me from seeing the future? I asked the witches as the Moon Witch spoke alone. I have learned how to ward off forces as powerful as time, death, and even winter. Your petty party trick could be so much more if you understood it. But in this place, even a golden-eyed child is powerless here, and you are far, far less than a golden-eyed child. What is special about you without your eye? She asked as I felt a burst of pain in my eye, before I felt something warm and wet flow down my face as I lifted my hand up to my now empty socket. And in the Sun Witch's hand was my eye, half gold as she gently pet the eye and she examined it closely. Do you think the Grey Sisters would give us something good for this? Too small. Imagine what the Necromancer would give us for that. Too big. I think the Norns would give us something good for their eye. The witches talked among each other, and as I reached for my eye, and my friends tried to tackle the witches, only for my eye to be tossed from witch to witch, as they easily dodged our hands and attacks as my eye was thrown around from place to place, before one of the witches, Star, got bored and she jumped up onto the rafters and she looked closely into my eye. Hold on, sisters. There's something wrong with this eye. I don't think we can trade it. she said before she threw it to Sun, who glanced into the eye, her other hand holding off Valero. He kept swinging his fists at her, only for her arm to be strong enough to keep him away from her. Oh, it isn't tainted by past. It's tainted by the future. We certainly can't keep it from them. If we kept it, we would be the ones harmed by it, she said as she tossed it to her final sister, Moon, who examined the eye, only a meter away from me, and she held up one finger like she was telling us to wait, and wait we all did as we stood frozen. Oh, what a vile bile to power one as young as you. Why didn't you tell us your wish, little seer? We had known that was your wish, we would have let you go. Let you go to burn, let you go to die, let you go to destroy, let you go to punish yourself. It is rare to see someone punish themselves worse than we can do, but clearly you can, and you have, and you will. Mercy is something you would never choose, and clearly mercy has not chosen you. Maybe we should eat the eye ourselves, spare Mirai their own trouble. Silly sister, your kindness will be the end to us all. See what happens when we stop fate. See what happens when we stop free will. Okay, let them choose their own path. Free them all, free them all, free them all to destroy themselves, the witches said among each other, before the moon witch lifted my detached eye to my socket, and she spit in the eye before pressing it into my socket. If I could have moved, I would have retched or even vomited on the witch. Instead, I felt the eye pushed into my socket, and I could see again through that eye, first through the red, but then it cleared as my tears returned to my eyes. Welcome to the end of the pumpkin house. Go through the front door and leave freely. Seek your wish, little seer. But how sad it is for someone who can see the future to be obsessed with the past. Sad, sad, sad. Mad, mad, mad. Bad, bad, bad. Make your sacrifice willingly. I've seen many sacrifice their life for immortality. I've seen many sacrifice humanity for power. I've never seen someone who is willing to sacrifice their future for the past. Magnificent. A magnificent punishment we could have never dreamed of. Magnificent, 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 the witches echoed as we left through the front door, not wanting to look back at the Baba Yagas, and outside the candy house, we could see the haunted house at the center of the pumpkin house. When I saw the house, I wished for just a moment that they kept my eye instead of giving it back to me. Standing in front of the house was the headless figure of the king. In one hand he had a hatchet that was rusty with blood. The purple and gold of the king's cape and clothes were coated in brown and red of the blood of his victims, and from the gaping wound of the neck hole, steam escaped into the night sky as he stepped towards us. The only thing standing between us and the pumpkin house was the headless king. Pumpkin patch that surrounded the house was full of discarded heads, their eyes melted out, their tongues severed, and the inside of the skull carved out so we could see the candles burning inside of the heads. I could smell the cooked flesh. It was like pork burning over a barbecue flame. Their burst eyes melted down their cheeks like candle wax. Hundreds of severed heads, and the headless king was clearly a greater threat to us. As he approached us, I held up a hand and I spoke without thinking. Headless king, we have made it this far. Would it be fun to kill us without a chance? I said, hoping it would work. The first and second challenge involved riddles of a different kind, so clearly this would work, right? The headless king did pause his stalking. And as more steam escaped from his neck, I could hear his voice echo around the pumpkin house as he asked, "Why would it be fun to me if I give you a chance?" he asked, and I knew I had my way in. "Clearly, you are stronger than us. Clearly, you are deadlier than us. Clearly, you have killed all that came your way. So, what if we give you a challenge where you can lose? The excitement surely will be more entertaining than just killing us immediately," I offered to the headless king, who then asked, "What challenge do you offer? Surely it is more interesting than just letting you pass by like you're a billy goat's gruff." "Of course, King of Hearts. I propose a game of riddles. We each come up with a riddle. The first one to come up with a riddle that the other cannot answer wins. If I win, you let us go by. If you win, you take our heads," I offered to the headless king, who tapped his hatchet on his knee. Clearly he was interested, but he wouldn't give up so easily. "I give you one stipulation. You cannot give me just one riddle to win. You will need to come up with a riddle for each life spared. 4 lives, 4 riddles. I cannot answer. And for every riddle I come with that you cannot answer, I will take a head, beginning with her," he said, pointing towards Mercy, who gulped from his threat. "So you want us all to play? I think we can do that." "No, little seer, just you. You will speak for all of your friends, and if you fail, you will watch them die before you. Every failure will be a loss you will see, you will feel, you will taste, and even smell. You wish to be a leader of men? Oh, I see it in your eyes, and I know this desire. I know this drive, but if you are to lead, then you will feel their loss and their pain. You will know the pain of failing and watching another die to your mistake." The headless king leaned in, and I could see inside of the neck. I could see blood and viscera, and I could see the hole in the throat had teeth. Lots and lots of human teeth. And as the King of Hearts spoke, I could see his breath waft on the breeze, and I could smell death on it as he spoke mere centimeters from my face. "Are you strong enough to truly lead, where your victory means the difference between life and death? Or are you merely another petty man who believes he can lead better than your king? Uneasy is the rest of the head that wears the crown. Why do you think it was easy for me to lose mine?" the King of Hearts said, his hatchet lifted up to my throat, cutting my skin just slightly, just enough to remind me of what he could do and what he had done. If he had eyes, I would have stared him down. Instead, I spoke back to him. "I agree to your terms, but I ask that I say my riddle first," I told him as the teeth inside of the throat vibrated against each other in apparent excitement, and the headless king stood tall and took a step back, his arms crossed as he tapped a foot. "Well, I am waiting, little seer. What riddle do you have for the King of Hearts?" he asked, and I thought for a moment before I offered my first riddle. "I am at the end of time. I am at the beginning of eternity. I am in every rise, but never in any fall. I am in every person, but not in anybody. I am twice in every letter, but never in any word. I am in me, but not in you. What am I asked, and the headless king who only chuckled before he answered. "The letter E. It is in the word letter, but not in the word word. It is a riddle about words and the letter E. Nice start, but it is my turn now." The undead king threw his hatchet into the ground, the stone in the ground cleaving before the blade, and letting it rest in the ground. clearly not caring for his blade. What is something that has 13 hearts, no soul, no brain, and no lungs? He asked as I thought for a moment, before I remembered where we were and the way he was thinking. He was the King of Hearts, not just a fairy tale character, but a part of something bigger than himself. A deck of cards, specifically the tarot deck with the heart suit. I told the king as he chuckled again. Clever. What is your next riddle? He asked, and I thought about it before I gave him a riddle that I got from a very young student at Agamemnon's. Some long-haired brat that fancied themselves a storyteller. If you have it, you don't share it. If you share it, you don't have it. I offered, and the headless king stopped tapping his foot. If I could see his head, I could imagine him thinking hard about it. Instead, there was silence in the yard of the pumpkin house before he finally offered an answer. Is it wealth? He offered, and I smiled. Thankfully, that wasn't the answer. Even if it was the answer, I guessed when I first heard the riddle. No, it's a secret. If you share a secret, it's no longer a secret, I said, and the headless king was silent before he nodded with his chest. Very well, Mercy may go on ahead, but you have 3 more to go, and I have many more chances to take their heads. A traveler begins his journey. He begins from the heart. He travels hundreds of kilometers in a day. He never sleeps, he never rests, yet never goes more than an arm's length away. Who is the traveler? He asked, and this answer I had quickly. I saw it on every head I could see. I could see it on my own hands, and I could see it on his own clothes. Blood. It begins in the heart, and it travels many kilometers in the vessels, but it never travels more than beyond the arm's length, I said, and the headless king chuckled. Very clever, but it is now your turn, he said, and I already had something for him. What is a question a human can never say no to, but a ghost can only ever say yes to? I asked as again the king thought about it, before he finally asked, Are you a ghost? I laughed at his joke, a nervous laugh, but a laugh nevertheless. Are you alive? I told him as he laughed again and said, Bolero could head into the house. Clearly you are a clever tactician, but are you wise? Someone can be slain neither indoors nor outdoors. They can be harmed by neither man nor beast. And they can not die during the day nor the night. So enlighten me. How did they die? He offered, and I already knew this legend. A fun little factoid from history class that brought a smile to my face as I answered. I wished for a moment that I could see his face as I answered. They died in their doorway during the evening, struck down by a chimera who was both a beast and a man. I told the King of Hearts, who slumped his shoulders. I think it was his best riddle, and now he didn't know what he was going to do next. A sensitive beast is in a fragile cage. The beast does not fly, does not crawl, does not walk, and does not sleep. But the beast flutters, slows, and runs. What cage is the beast in? I asked to the silence, before he picked up his hatchet and he answered. A rib cage. The beast is a heart, he said, and I felt my heart drop as he stepped closer and closer to Mary, lifting his hatchet up as he prepared his swing. Wait! I yelled, and he stopped, the blade mere centimeters from Mary's throat. Why should I wait? He asked, and I desperately thought back to our deal. You haven't won yet. Our agreement is if I couldn't figure out your riddle, you would take out a head. It wasn't that if you figured out one of my riddles, you took their head. Instead, it's now your turn for a riddle. And surely the King of Hearts is not a dishonest man? I asked as he thought about it. Mary's eyes were terrified and she hyperventilated as the King of Hearts thought it over. If he wanted to kill, he could have, and all I had to keep him from killing was his word. The only thing in the world I had to keep this killer from killing was his word. I felt my heart pounding inside of my rib cage as I watched and hoped that the King of Hearts would take a step back. But he could just as easily decide I was wrong, worse, that I was cheating. Sure enough, though, he took a step back, his hatchet down by his side. Very well, Tactician. You are correct about the limits of the game. I will respect these rules, and just know this. If we had a chance to play this game again, this time the hatchet was pressed against my neck. It moved too fast for me to even track or predict that it was going there. I would never agree to such terms. So Mary lives, for now. I will even give you another chance to bring her into the pumpkin house with you. Do not confuse kindness with weakness, he said as he withdrew his hatchet from my neck, and he began with a new challenge. What is something that is fast when it's sharp, dim when it's slow, and useless when you only have half? He said, and I realized the most challenging part of the challenge. Fear slows your mind down. You begin thinking about your own anxiety. You focus on your pounding heart, and losing goes from just meaning you don't move forward to meaning you are losing your life. The blade on my neck, the fact he could move quicker than I could predict, or even the fact that he threatened Mary so easily, it slowed my mind, it scattered my wits, and made it impossible to think about the riddle. Do you give up? He asked, and I shook my head as I took deep breaths, one after the other, and I imagined my fear as a blue fluid that dripped down my hands and off my fingers, cooling beneath me as I took more cold breaths, imagining it cooling my veins as I finally focused on the headless king before me. He was clever, but I wasn't going to let him scare my mind. The fear and the danger were still there, but I let it cool and pull away from me, letting myself focus. There would be time for panic later. The answer is wits. When you're considered sharp-witted, it's a synonym for quick-wit. Dim and slow-witted are synonyms, and half-wit is someone with useless intelligence, I said, and he turned his body toward me. I could see more steam release from his neck before he spoke again. Very well. It is your turn again. I took another deep breath, imagining the cold air around me cooling me, and imagining my fear dripping out of my body as I asked my next riddle. What is something that grows as it shrinks? I asked, and I could tell he was stuck as he stood in silence for nearly a minute before he finally answered. Reputation? Because as it grows worse, it spreads? He asked, and I shook my head before I answered. The cold. It grows colder as the temperature shrinks, I told him, and he didn't chuckle this time as he pointed towards the house. Mary may head into the house. This time, if you fail, it'll be your head removed, he warned, and I gulped when Mary entered the house, and I realized I was now truly alone against the headless king. Leadership is where you are never alone, and yet you're so very lonely. You can never truly rest because you know the pain of protecting others, knowing that your victory is never your own because it's what you bring to others, but you have to carry their losses. But is it worth it just to have your name as their leader? He asked me. Not sure if it was a riddle or not, I waited for a moment before I answered. I am not lonely, and the way you lead isn't the way I lead. I will get a far greater victory than they ever will. Without me, they wouldn't be as far as are now. Yes, they're in the pumpkin house. And you are not. You brought them here, and you might never go inside. Is that enough for you? No, it's not enough. It's only enough when I am in there. Ask your riddle now so I can head into the pumpkin house, I said with confidence, and the hatchet was held against my neck again. I think you forgot. You only have a chance because of my word, and if you didn't have that, you'd be decorating my lawn. Keep your arrogance under control, or I'll show you what happens when a king decides to not keep their word, he said before he asked his riddle, his blade still pressed against my neck as he asked. I cry without eyes. I yell without a mouth. I fly without wings. What am I? He asked, and I swallowed another gulp. I kept trying to visualize my fear dripping out of me. But the blade pressed against me kept me filled up far quicker than I could drain it out of me. So with nothing else, I closed my eyes and I focused on the darkness behind my eyes, not thinking about the blade, not thinking about the pumpkin house. I just thought about the riddle. When I thought I had an answer, I answered in a quiet whisper. The clouds, they fly without wings, they have thunder inside of them, and they cry by raining, I said to the silence, and as the silence continued, I opened my eyes and I could see the blade was pulled away, and it was now my turn. As the headless king stood in silence for my riddle, sadly at this point, the only one I could think of was one from a book. One I hoped that the King of Hearts did not know. The thing that devours all things, birds, beasts, trees, flowers, gnaws iron, bites steel, grinds hard stones to meal, slays kings, ruins temples, and beats high mountains down, I offered, and when the undead king did not have an immediate answer, I had hoped that I got them. He tapped his hatchet against his leg again before he finally answered. Is it death? He offered, and I shook my head in relief. No, it's time, I said, and there was silence before he realized that he lost all of us. Very well, Mirai. You may head into the pumpkin house, he said as I walked up the stone path. I stepped onto the creaky wooden porch. A single carved pumpkin sat by the entrance guarding the way in, and as I grabbed the door, I felt cold steel press into the side of my neck. You know, I could take your life here, and no one would know, and no one would care. I could easily say you failed. I could say that you ran past me. I could say you lied to me, and this is the fair punishment. I could so easily cut you down. But I won't. I warn you, Tactician. You believe that you are special, that you are above the sheep of the world. But you are not. Everyone was as dishonest as you that you wouldn't survive. You'd be cut down a long time ago. Honest people can live without the dishonest, but the dishonest cannot live without the honest. Remember that you would be dead if I wasn't honest. Remember my steel when you get your wish.